Hi sewing friends, welcome to my sewing room. My name is Beth, and if you're new, welcome. Today's video is about a crazy quilt I found recently for a whole $4.49 and about a new house. Now this house is a mini house, but I'm going to have some fun filling this house with miniature things, and the first thing I'm going to make for my little house here is a crazy quilt, and I thought I'd use this old quilt that I just found as my inspiration. Now this is a new home, so we're still under construction. There are a lot of things that need to be done. One of the first things I did though was I did purchase a sewing machine. I have some old furniture from my childhood here. I made a couple of mice from a pattern. I will leave the link below. And here's my little sewing room, and I'm looking forward to filling this house with a lot of miniature quilts. So there's no bed, but that's where the bed will go, and today I'm going to make a crazy quilt for this little house. Here's the quilt again, and you can see it's all made of ties. Some of the ties look like ties and some are just pieces of ties, but it's really a work of art, this quilt top. It had not been finished, and there were still some names written in pen that had not been embroidered yet, and I am going to use this as my inspiration for my little dollhouse quilt. Of the quilt from the thrift store used a foundation, a large foundation, and she put ties on it, and I pulled out my ties and I cut some pieces, and I'm going to put this together in a crazy quilt style. I turned my iron down and did a little pressing. Most of my ties are silk, and so I can't use a hot iron, and I also try to use a piece of cotton over the top when I'm pressing. So I started with a centerpiece, and as I added pieces around, I just made sure that the piece I was adding had a fold. So most of my ties already have a fold somewhere in the tie, so I left that fold so I won't have any raw edges, and I put the fold over a raw edge, and I just worked around my square here with this foundation square, and I cut little pieces and kept adding them all around. The large quilt that I purchased used ties, but she used a zigzag stitch with brown thread on all of the ties, so that's what I did. I got some brown thread and I pulled out one of the machines that I have here that has a zigzag stitch. Not all of my machines have a zigzag stitch, and again I just took the fold and laid it over some raw edges, and I zigzagged along the fold. I have my piece of muslin here all covered with my tie fabric, and now I'm going to press. Again, I did add a little water to my ties, then I put a cotton over the top and I pressed and made sure everything was nice and flat, and then I used the back as my guide to trim away the excess. Added a zigzag stitch all the way around my little crazy quilt, and next up I'm going to add some decorative stitches with some embroidery floss. Here are the beautiful stitches that are on the large quilt that I'm sharing. Just some really pretty, dainty little designs, all used with different colors of embroidery floss. I have a book here with some stitches. That's a good resource, and I'll leave that link below. And I also have a lot of embroidery thread. So I'll just choose the easier of some of these options. I'm not going to make some really difficult stitches. There were quite a few to choose from here, and I enjoyed looking at all of the examples, but I'm going to use a really simple design for my first design, and I'm using 3 strands, and I wanted to show you that little card. I make little cards to hold my embroidery floss when I need to wrap it on something. I don't buy those little cards you can buy. I just cut it out of cardboard and it works great. So I'm going to use 3 strands and begin with some stitches. First stitch I'll add here is a buttonhole stitch, and I'm using some yellow thread, and I'm just going right over my zigzag stitch. I added a pink chain stitch, and now I'm working on one of the more difficult for me was a cretin stitch. It involved a little more thinking. I don't typically use this stitch, but I enjoyed learning a new one, and I did it with some green thread. I put a stem stitch through the center of one of my ties, and I'm hoping to add a few little lazy daisy flowers to this stem stitch. I'm just eyeballing a wavy line, and this will be my stem for my flowers. Once I was done with all of my pretty stitches, I pulled out this cotton fabric that's really not good for quilting because it has those holes, but this is just for a doll quilt, so it's okay, and it's so pretty. I was happy to find a use for it. And I also had this old cream, sort of a bias tape with a little bit of lace on it. So I don't know the name of it, but I'm going to add that all the way around. So the first thing I did is I cut the backing of my tiny quilt to match the size of my quilt. I pinned the 2 layers together, and then it was time to add this bias tape, and I'm going to open it up. It's very tiny, so I did, it was very fiddly, not my favorite thing to do, but I opened it up and I attached it to the back of my quilt, and then I'm going to wrap it around to the front and do some top stitching. Once I top stitched all the way around my quilt, I was able to put it in my new little house, and I'm really happy with how this came out. It was a fun way to just experiment with a new to me quilt design, and I will enjoy making who knows how many quilts I'll get to add to my little mouse house here. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.